Hey, just a quick preface. My name is Brennan, just a regular guy in his mid-30s. Moved to this godforsaken city in my early 20s for grad school. Both feels like yesterday and forever ago that I brought the moving truck from the comfort of my undergrad in the woods to move here with my college buddies to uproot our lives and make a big change. Several years have passed since then. I've accumulated a number of horrible experiences, or I guess in this case, tales from living here. Spoiler alert, I have survived them all, which is the only way I'm able to be speaking to you right now. All this to say, I may go into a lot of details about myself, my job, my friends, all other types of things. They may or may not seem very relevant to the story. Part of it is that I'm a rambler with pretty severe ADHD and just don't know when to shut the hell up. The other part is that at some point, either in this story or a future one from my life in this city, the information will be relevant. Either way, I hope you get something out of these stories, whether it be some mild enjoyment, something in the background that passes the time, or maybe some tips that'll save your life if you ever find yourself in the city of Phear. Welcome to the first episode of City of Phear, a fictional horror podcast. I'm your host, Brennan Jordan. I have a few spooky tales that are loosely based off of some crazy experiences I've had in my city. I write all my stories in the first person as myself, as if I was, telling them to you over a beer at the bar or a drink at the local coffee shop. This first set of stories is fairly tame compared to what I had planned, but just in case, I have some trigger warnings in the show notes. Creating this has been a labor of love, and I've written so many more stories than I've showcased tonight, so I hope I can keep it going, and I hope you keep tuning in. But enough about me and all of that, let's get into stories. This first story is the very first story I wrote for this podcast. The truth behind this story is something that's kind of stuck with me for many years since the occurrence. I love public transportation, but it's not always the safest where I live getting off at certain stations at night. That's the gist of what this story entails. I hope you enjoy the Phreeze Response. I lie my head on the desk. Last session's done for the day. I don't know why I do this to myself. Finally done after finishing up the 9th therapy hour in a row. Some of them easy, some of them difficult, but I always save the couple sessions for the end of the day. It's not really my choice. Trying to coordinate working schedules between myself and two other people, it's always difficult. But after a full day of work, and more often than not skipping lunch, now I find myself having to moderate between two adults and just keep them from, screaming at each other, making the worst passive-aggressive comments ever. It's terrible. Now, I'm a seasoned therapist, so I do it, and it's just whatever. But doing couple sessions always brings me back to my youth when, I used to referee younger kids' ice hockey games. I feel like I'm either breaking up fights between kids or I'm worried about the parents trying to meet me in the parking lot for not calling the tripping penalty against their kid. Almost always feels like a lose-lose situation, no matter what I do. This doesn't have too much to do with anything other than letting you know I'm pretty stressed at this point. They don't pay us enough for this shit. Now, don't get me wrong, I love helping people, but the fact we don't get paid enough is pretty universal for all therapists around the country. No reason to be any different for this city. Well, all done. Another day, another dollar, I guess. Surprised by my snarkiness as a quote-unquote helping professional. Probably really awful media portrayals people seem to think that we're like doctors and make bank, but the reality, the majority of us are just scraping by paycheck to paycheck. But hey, let me get off of my pity party soapbox for a second. I'm done. I'm done for the day. I get to go home. Maybe if I have enough energy or emotional wherewithal, I can actually meet up with some friends for a late night drink before I turn in and get ready to do it all over again. I leave my office, and as I walk down the street towards the subway station, I can't help but laugh a bit. In this part of the city, Definitely more affluent and upscale than where I can afford to live. The sidewalks sparkle. Yeah, you heard that right. They actually sparkle. Looks like they put like chunks of glass or something shiny into the concrete along the walkway so the light reflects off of it. Makes me feel like I'm in some fairy tale before I have to take the steps down underground, and even here smell like piss before I hop on the train back home. Don't pay too much attention to me though. I work in a spot that caters to the big rich university folks in the city. Meanwhile, I live in the just about to be but not quite gentrified neighborhood far away. The one that's got that weird combination of people coming in from the affluent suburbs in droves, forcing the long-term residents out, but still has more zombies on the street corners, parks, and subway stations than a Romero flick. Jesus, I'm tired. Just want to get back home. I'm weighing whether I want to text some friends to see if they want to meet up for a drink at one of the neighborhood spots, or if I just want to get home, throw on some pajamas, binge watch one of the latest series I've been obsessed with. Wait for my train, throw on my noise-canceling headphones, put on music from the Get Up Kids. I need some nostalgic stuff to make me feel a little bit better taking in everything that I had to today. Train ride home is fairly uneventful. Only a few folks in the car with me. Don't pay too much attention as, the album's something to write home about blasting my ears. I get a text from my buddy Steve. Hey, bud. Me and the gang are hanging at the usual spot. Come on through. Well, I guess I got some plans now. Sure do with a few beer and shot specials before I turn in, and the train rumbles underground for a bit until it crests and comes above and becomes elevated. Just a few stops until I get off. It's not completely dark, but there's barely a sliver of the sun showing, if at all, past the skyline. This car pulls up to the station, I step off the train and onto the platform. Take a good look left and right. You gotta keep your wits about you around here. I was the only one to get off at my stop. Usually there's always a few artists, drunks, locals, zombies, or other poor social workers like me getting off to go to my neighborhood. It's not quite what I'd expect, but oh well, all good I guess. Nobody I have to look over my shoulder for in case they think the dress shoes and dress shirt mean I have more than $7 in my wallet when I've actually only got $3. When it's summer and everything's hot as hell, you expect things to smell, especially if you live in a big city. It's unavoidable. Fall, which it is, early October to be clear, you'd think it wouldn't be so bad, but the station reeks of piss and really bad weed. Surprised I don't see a couple of users hanging in the corner tonight, but the only remnants of them is a small pile of human shit and a few discarded needles I have to sidestep going down the stairs. I go through the turnstile and it's just a little over a half mile back to my place. The bar my friends are at, somewhat on the way, so I figure I'll make the decision of whether to meet them at about the halfway point. I am regretting a life decision a little right now. You see, given my limited means, I live on the boundary between where it's really punk rock and artsy and cool to live, and where it's really dangerous. Usually during the fall to winter seasons, when it gets dark super early, folks are getting more desperate. Veil's just a tad bit thinner. Since I've been here long enough to know this and adjust for my own safety, I usually get off one station earlier than my usual. It's a bit of a farther walk home, but much safer and well worth it. But I wasn't paying attention, or maybe was too tired because I did not do that today. Even in the most dangerous sections of the city, it doesn't feel dangerous so long as there are a lot of people around, which isn't out of the norm for most big cities like this one, and there's a sense that everyone's afraid, but knows the score. So willing to look out for you and hopes you'd look out for them in case something out-of-worldly were to happen. Occasionally, though, nights like tonight, you find yourself alone. Everything looked a bit darker than it should as I walked down those stairs, stepped over the shit, went through that turnstile. I didn't got any texts back from my friends to see if they were still at the spot they had mentioned, but at this point, I'd be okay talking the bartender's ear off or sitting in the corner like the nerd I am, playing some phone games, while I just drown my sorrows in some whiskey. Not long after going through the turnstile, making my quick right turn and stepping over some trash, I saw an odd figure. I saw a person that was wrapped in a dirty bed comforter. They immediately gestured towards me. To be honest, I've seen so many weird things around here that this didn't completely surprise me. But it was the first time I saw someone using a bed comforter for clothing. It was dirty off-white with a few patches of random brown and blue squares, pretty badly stained. Looked like one of those old bedding pieces I might have had in college or held on way too long after I should have trashed it, paid a few bucks for something new. In spite of the beckoning, I did my usual and tried just to walk past and ignore. A person yelled from across the street. "Hey buddy, help me out, would you? I need some help. Real quick. I promise I'm not asking for money." It might have been nice if I kept my feet moving, but then again, in spite of all of my bitching and complaining about people earlier, I actually am a caring person. I stopped for just an instant. I didn't turn, but I felt the figure shuffle across the street and get closer to me. And I felt a weird chill run down my spine. "Dude, I'm not one of these assholes that are out here normally. I don't need any money. I just need to call somebody so I have a place to stay. Can you lend me your phone?" I'm not gonna lie to you. I felt a crazy, out of the norm, stranger danger response to this. My adrenaline got pumping some, but more so than anything else I thought, hell no. If I get this dude my phone, I'm never getting it back, or worse. I kept walking. I felt guilty in this case. You know, if this is the case of me just being sort of classist, not willing to help someone who is at the end of their rope, I didn't have too much time to dwell on the guilt though. I kept walking faster and faster. I heard the footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps. Boom, boom, boom. Faster and faster. My follower was close, and with each step closing in, I tried to pick up my pace, but he picked up his pace even more. I heard him yell out, "Come on, man. What? You're too good to lend me your phone? You're afraid I'm gonna jack it, you rich prick?" I don't know what it was exactly. Something about the way he said that just hit me in a certain way, and I did begin to feel guilty as hell. Quickly thought to myself, if I become so jaded and so paranoid that I'm not willing to help out a fellow human being when they just need to make a phone call? I've been out at bars in the past, had a few too many, had no juice in my phone and needed help. Why am I acting like this? While I'm thinking about this, I realized something. The guy following me stopped, just as I did, and didn't keep coming towards me. I began to turn around, but felt a sudden severe chill that went all the way down my spine. At that point, I booked it. I just took off running. I don't know why. I immediately realized there were footsteps behind me again. Not running at my pace, but trying to keep up. As I get farther and farther away from the train stop and closer to the residential neighborhoods in my house, I see a guy coming up from across the street. It's the first person I've seen since I got off the train, other than the, comforter-clad guy following me. This dude was a bit taller than me, was dressed in a bunch of plaid, had a man bun, stereotype of that type of richer hipsters that are moving in and taking over. That doesn't matter. The important thing is, I don't know what I tried to do. Maybe I tried to warn him. Maybe I tried to ask for help. I just kept running and probably said something like, "Hey, don't try to with that," before I got far enough ahead. I didn't hear the fast footsteps behind me. I did hear this though. "Hey buddy, what's going on? Do you need anything?" Then within a few seconds, I heard a terrible sound. I don't know exactly how to describe it. Like a banshee shriek, really high-pitched, sounding like a cross between something ear-shattering high and one of those old generic, old-school computer game sounds that they used to make for dragons. I don't know. Well, I should know better. I'm not new to this city. When shit like this happens, you better just keep on walking. I heard the sound. I readied my feet to run, and as I turned around to look at the source of the noise, I saw this. I saw the bed comforter fall to the ground while something inhuman and terrifying came out. When I initially looked sideways at this dude, he looked like a normal person around my size. But what I saw coming out of this comforter was a terrifying creature, with legs and arms 3 times as long compared to its torso. For what a normal human should be. They were bent in multiple directions, as if it had 3 or more knee joints. Skin was super pale. Not just pale, but almost translucent. I could see purple veins running all throughout its body. It had a bald, round head and rows of teeth that looked like sharks. It was staring at the dude who passed me, and he looked like he was in a trance. The creature's eyes looked black as coals, but at the same time looked like they had just this weird hint of glowing purple in them. Dude looked stunned, almost like he was shaking in fear, but he wasn't shaking at all. He looked like he was a stone statue. The creature, in one quick movement, like those crazy snake videos I've seen on YouTube, lunged to take a bite out of his shoulder. And I did the dumbest thing anyone could. But hey, sometimes we just do things out of impulse. I yelled, "Hey dude, knock it the fuck off, leave him alone." I don't know why I said that exactly. My adrenaline was pumping and I wasn't really thinking clearly, but shit. I was seeing this going down and watching a monster eat someone right in front of me. Well, shouldn't have done that. This disgusting creature had this big guy on the ground after taking a bloody chunk out of his shoulder, while occasionally shrieking that terrible ear-piercing sound. It bent its neck upwards and looked at me, and I saw directly into its eyes. I didn't see just a hint of purple anymore, but a flash of a few seconds of purple, and of what I initially thought was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. Not gonna lie, for just a few seconds, I felt like I was in a state of peace and calm, unlike anything I've ever felt. That only lasted for about 5 seconds, maybe less, before the feeling of anxiety and terror returned, and I tried to turn around and take off once again, but I couldn't though. First thing I noticed was everything from my knees down were not doing anything that I wanted them to, and I kind of fell face first onto the concrete. Well, the next few seconds, I could feel that the paralysis was moving up my body. With every second, I could move less and less from my feet up. Holy shit, I'm donezo, I thought. I haven't even paid off my damn student loans yet. How's my family gonna react? Of course they'll think, "I told you so. You should have never moved to the city of Phear. We spent our whole lives working to get you and your brothers out." I thought, who's gonna tell my therapy clients? They'll show up tomorrow expecting to get support and won't be there, because I'll be eaten by this weird, ugly, translucent fucker of a creature. In that moment, so lost in my own thoughts, my own mortality, and also trying to dissociate a bit, so I didn't have to fully experience being eaten the way this dude was, that I guess I didn't see the creature's whole process. It looked like for a second, it was trying to decide. Did he want to focus on eating him, or did he want to focus on eating me? This felt like an eternity, but at the end, the thing turned away from me, like a hungry shark, lunged towards the stomach of the man who had passed me by. As I could barely move, I was forced to watch as this horrible evil thing tore out this guy's innards no further than 50 feet from me. I've seen some pretty gruesome slasher movies and whatnot, but nothing prepared me for seeing this pale, gangly, sharp-toothed, gross-ass creature methodically tear out this guy's large and small intestines. And oh my god, the smell! It will haunt me for the rest of my life. Over time, as I was forced to watch this creature enjoy its meal, but it was not looking directly at me, I felt control return to my body. Similar to when the bloods run out due to sleeping the wrong way, but much slower. Trust me, as soon as I could, I got up and took off, and I never looked back. Maybe it's the Irish in my blood. Maybe I watched too many episodes of Cheers growing up. But there's nothing more I love than a good neighborhood pub with friendly regulars and just some good old tradition. No better type of place to grab a quick drink after work before heading home for the day. The story is about trying to find a place like that doesn't quite hit the mark, but certainly does hit. I present to you the Jabroni Room Saloon. Life's been stressful. What else is new? Top of work, financial struggles, and a bunch of other bullshit. The few dating app dates I've gone on, they were all a bust. Seems like all my friends are all wrapped up in their good lives with their significant others. Their couples' nights out. They're fun vacations. I've been beginning to feel more and more isolated lately. The stress of the old shrink job and feeling more cut off from my support system has led me to some pretty unhealthy ways of coping with the day-to-day. Most nights after work, get off of the L train home, stop off at my local watering hole. It's fun, but it's also a bit sad that there's multiple spots where I know all the bartenders and they all know me. You know, I get a few citywide specials, shot a gut-wrenching bottom shelf bourbon and a Pabst Blue Ribbon for about $5 at most places. And then I end up spending way too many dollars on pinball machines. Pinball is one of the only things that took my mind off the stress at work, and the fact that I was in my mid-30s, everyone else I loved and cared about were doing pretty alright with their lives while I was stuck in limbo. Now, the pinball obsession is a story for another time, though. I definitely got one that's pretty creepy and all, but this is about a different night than that one. This night, I went to my local spot, ordered up a special from the bartender, young charismatic guy that's seen me enough to just say, "Hey, you want the usual?" Nod my head, he pours out the well whiskey and cracks the top off of a pounder of PBR. In step with my usual new unhealthy routine, I slug down the shot, shudder a bit, realizing like every other day for the past too many I've done this, that I haven't had anything to eat today. Skip lunch again because I had too much paperwork to catch up on. Take a sip of my beer, turn around to face the pinball machine. I put a few quarters in and get ready to play, hoping that win or lose will be enough to take my mind off the stress of the day. I instinctively hit the game start button on the left-hand side, but get no results. I hit a few more times and look up the display to see it didn't register any of my coins. I press the quarter release button a few times, but none are coming out. Simultaneously reach in my pockets for more quarters while continuing to press the release button as my anxiety begins to rise to a level that's a hell of a lot more than is appropriate for this situation. I mean, you get used to a certain comforting thing when you're stressed, and when it's taken away unexpectedly, it's not that abnormal to freak out a bit. Bartender, he knows me. Knows my affinity or at least habit for the pinball machine and calls out to me. "Hey, sorry bud, it's busted. We got a guy coming out tomorrow to look at it. How many quarters did you lose? I'll reimburse you." I exhale and walk back to the bar. Tell the bartender what I put in, continue drinking my beer. I was planning to sip on in between balls on the machine. It's really stupid how much it's bothered me. But the last thing I wanted right now was to be left alone with my thoughts from the day. Second to last thing I wanted was to have random barflies spark up superficial conversation with me. See, I'm normally pretty extroverted and love to socialize, but after a rough day of doing the therapist gig, talking to people all day, hearing about all their woes, I need a good buffer between that and figuring out the quote-unquote how to people again. Not my daily after-work pinball escape. I think it's time to head home. So I chugged my beer, gulped down the extra shot the bartender left in consolation for my lost quarters, and away I went a-walking. Not quite sure exactly how I got there, other than getting turned around in my own neighborhood, but I found myself outside a small run-down looking pub with a neon sign over the door that read, "The Jabroni Room Saloon." During my long walk home, and after a few too many specials, I decided I needed to stop in a bar along the way somewhere to use the bathroom, or risk taking a piss in an alley somewhere and incurring either the wrath of the police or whoever lived around there. I figured this bar had to be the better of the two options. It's a small bar on the corner of the block, almost indistinguishable from the rest of the row homes aside from the sign. Either way, it's like a good spot to go on, take a piss. I'll order a beer while I'm there, as I'm inebriated enough to be stumbling a bit, but not so much to ignore, proper business etiquette and use the bathroom without patronizing the spot. From the outside, I can't tell if it's crowded or not. The whole block around is kind of quiet, considering it's still pretty early in the night. So one guy standing outside the door smoking a cigarette. He's a big guy, not too tall, but stout, with a crew cut. Bit of a goatee and a beer belly that put my pandemic pudge to shame. He's wearing a black faded t-shirt with a professional wrestler from the 80s on it. One of the guys my older brother used to idolize and make me watch old VHS tapes rented from the local video store so I'd understand, what good wrestling was. Made me chuckle a bit. Love a good bit of nostalgia. Always. So I went to walk into the bar. Old crew cut here put his meaty hand up in front of me and said, "Hold on, brother." I instinctively reached for my wallet to show ID. Though I found it really strange. In my neighborhood here, it's rare that any bar is ID'd at the door, especially shitty hole-in-the-walls like this, and even more so not on weekdays. He cut me off. "No. Hey, I don't recognize you and I know everyone. It's a bit early, but you're not a jabroni, are you?" I swear, if I had a beer in my mouth at that moment, I would have spit it out laughing. Between slightly drunken giggles, I said, "No, I was on my way home. I needed to grab one more drink and take a piss." I figured this was just some asshole local guy, not an actual bouncer, so I moved to walk past him in the bar when he gripped me, pulling me on the fabric of my shirt around the chest. Just at the moment I was about to enter fight or flight, a voice came from inside the bar. "He's not the one." The man immediately let go and looked sheepishly apologetic. "Hey man, I'm sorry. You just never know about those jabronis trying to sneak in to get one extra." I honestly didn't know what to make of that. But glad that I somehow avoided an altercation with the dude almost twice my girth. I walked inside. It's the usual dive. Real small, narrow, just a bar space for about 12 seats along it, which were mostly filled. Just enough room to walk by behind the seats on the way back, where there was a small back room with a pool table and bathroom. I ran in the back, took a long piss. Contemplated whether I should even order a beer, given how strange that initial interaction with the dude outside was. Well, things were already pretty weird here. I didn't want to make them any weirder by running in, using the bathroom, running out, at least throwing the place in business. So I settled on a stool and had one. Only one older fellow behind the bar working. He looked to be an older gent, probably in his 70s, desperately trying to look younger than his age, with obviously dyed black hair, slicked back over what was most likely a pretty severe balding crown. He was oddly dressed up for such a dive, wearing a nice black suit, white shirt, and a red bow tie. While I waited for him to finish pouring out a beer from the tap for a customer down the bar, I glanced around, noticing the walls scattered with framed pictures of old famous professional wrestlers and scenes from some of the more famous matches I remembered from growing up. There were also a number of black and white photographs from an era long before my time. "What'll you have?" barked the bartender, standing right in front of me. I jumped as I didn't realize he walked over. I asked if he did specials, and of course he did. All neighborhood bars around me did. This place only charged $4 though. That's a throwback. For a second I thought I might need to make this more of a regular spot. Overall, the place was pretty sad though. I looked around and saw that most of the patrons looked like haggard, middle-aged, drunk folk. Don't get me wrong. A few more years, I might end up the same way if I can't get a better handle on my job stress. But this just seemed to have a really, I don't know quite how to explain it, a different kind of depressing feeling. Before I could really figure out what I was observing, a man at the end of the bar caught my eye. He was the only one smiling. While the majority of the crowd looked like they had just gotten off a 12-hour shift in a quarry or something, this guy looked like he'd had it even worse. He looked like he'd seen some better days indeed, and I wouldn't be surprised if he hadn't been living on the streets for a while. Some tattered clothes, long scraggly beard, and greasy shoulder-length gray hair. He smiled like this manic, jagged, toothed smile while he swallowed his pineal. The beer spilling out the sides of the glass, all over his chin, already staining his shirt. The locals side-eyed him, chuckling in between their hushed conversations. He finished his beer and slammed the glass on the bar. He smacked it on the bar a few times, trying to get the bartender's attention. The bartender walked over to the man and said very loudly, he wanted the whole bar to hear, "One more? Are you a jabroni?" The man nodded his head enthusiastically. The bartender said, "You know I need you to say it, Gil." The man stood up, one foot on the bar stool, and proclaimed at the top of his lungs, "I'm a jabroni!" The bartender poured him another pint from the tap. Everyone in the bar let out a quick cheer. Safe to say, a lot of questions at this point. But I was about finished my beer, and this whole scene was a bit much for me. I ducked out front to grab a quick smoke before I planned on finishing my beer and heading back on my way home. Crew Cut was still outside, standing in front of the bar. He was still smoking. I stood to the side of the entrance, lit my cigarette while he eyed me suspiciously. A minute or so into my smoke, I saw a young guy, probably in his mid-20s, short red hair, scruffy short beard. He came stumbling up to the front of the bar. Looked like he was either already drunk or on, something crazy to say the least. Stood in front of old Crew Cut there, tripped over his own feet. He began to speak, but he was slurring his words, and he let out a quick but kind of disturbing giggle, trying his best to find his words. Crew Cut held up his hand, and, similar as he had when I tried to walk in, he said, "Are you?" And before he could finish, the man yelled out, "I'm a jabroni!" It was the weirdest thing. It seemed like he yelled this with a combination of pride, but at the same time a sad desperation. Crew Cut smiled ear to ear like a cartoon Cheshire cat, turned towards the bar, cracked the door, and yelled, "Bring the jabroni his drink! It's time!" Within a few seconds, I saw the bar empty out of the front door. The sad regulars, looking worn out from their work days, looked like they had gotten a second wind, all with smiles on their faces. The old slick-back bartender came out holding a tray of shot glasses. He passed them out to the patrons. He gave me one. It looked like well whiskey, like most of what I've been slugging back throughout the night. He offered the last shot to the red-headed man, but before handing it over to him, he asked loudly in a dramatic way for all to hear, "Who exactly are you, good sir?" The red-headed man proclaimed, "I'm the jabroni." The bartender smiled and handed him the shot, which he immediately drank. As he drank, so did the others, and so did I. It only took a few seconds. Patrons smiling after downing their whiskey in unison. They threw their shot glasses down on the ground at the same time, as if this was like rehearsed or something, like it had been done countless times before. The shock, the unexpected sound of the shattering glass, it took me a few seconds to realize quite what was happening. All of the patrons pounced on the poor red-headed man. They drew knives, brass knuckles, small clubs. One even had a baseball bat he'd been holding out of sight behind his back. The group surrounded the man and went to quick work, ruthlessly turning him into a lifeless, bloody pulp within seconds, all while cheering, yipping, and screaming battle cries. Within probably 30 seconds, what felt like a lifetime for me in that moment, I saw blood, guts, and probably chunks of flesh and teeth go spraying into the air. The corpse of the man was so messed up, you could hardly even tell it was human. While I sat there, mouth wide open and in shock, a few of them dragged the body to a back alley, while the rest of them high-fived, hugged each other, started back into the bar. A couple of the men grabbed onto me, cheering, hugging, not realize I hadn't taken part, wasn't part of the crowd, and they pushed me back into the bar along with them. I sat on my stool, head in my hands, trying to collect myself. I noticed that the only one who hadn't left the bar the whole time was the old man Gil at the end. He's banging his pint glass on the bar stubbornly. The bartender walked over to him and yelled, "Get out of here, Gil! Come back tomorrow and tell the doorman what you are. You get one more drink." The old man muttered some curses under his breath and stumbled out. What the hell did I just see? My head was spinning. I gotta get out of here. The bartender noticed my drink was low. He poured a pint without me asking and said, "That'll be $5, bud." Without thinking, I nervously reached for my wallet. I opened it up, saw I was all out of cash. The bartender saw it too. He leaned over the bar, way over the bar, looked me dead in the eye and said loudly, so everyone could hear, "Are you a jabroni?" I got up off that stool and hauled ass out that front door. I sprinted as long as I could before I ran out of steam. I don't know where I ended up, and damn, it took me a good while to get my bearing and make it back home. At least I was far away from that god-awful place. Plenty of horrible things in this city. There's all types of ghouls, ghosts, monsters, and things you couldn't imagine in your most horrific nightmares. That aside, sometimes it's the people in this city that are the most disgusting and terrifying of all. They say when you sit down to write a story, you should really write about what you know. Well, all the stories so far are really based off of real life experiences I've had or real places I've been to. I thought it best to really write about what I know for this last one. What I know most about is being a therapist, and being a therapist is my true passion in life's work. Decided to do a little mini-series within this podcast of stories exclusively centered around the work of being a therapist. That being said, I hope you enjoyed the finale tonight. I present with you Private Practice Horror Story Number 1, Rachel. So you can probably tell just by the way that I talk, I'm not exactly the richest or classiest of guys. I come from a pretty humble background, real hard-working family. A little rough around the edges, but I think it helps me relate a lot better to the people that I work with. It's a joke around the bars that I frequent. I'm the lower middle class Frasier in the joint. A lot of times, becoming a therapist is something reserved for well-to-do folks who have trust funds or college funds set aside to pay. Because master's degrees cost a hell of a lot, and degrees in psychology rarely lead to high-paying jobs. I got so much debt from school that if I made monthly payments for what I could afford, it'd never get paid off if I lived and kept paying until I was 100. Thankfully, there's a program where if I work for nonprofits for so many years, after about 10, the debt gets forgiven. The only downside to it is that nonprofits generally pay a hell of a lot less for therapists than private companies or agencies, which means for the time being, I'm not getting out of that lower middle class status anytime soon. So while I had to maintain the 9-to-5 at the nonprofit I worked for, it's been a good many years into my career and I needed some extra money. I was getting tired of living off of ramen and Easy Mac like the college days. Best thing I figured I could do is moonlight and do a little private practice work on the side. My own primary care doctor, who had a small doctor's office around my neighborhood, had mentioned to me that they generally closed up around 6 p.m. They were looking to see if any other medical professionals or specifically therapists wanted to rent out the office space. That sounded good to me. I took her up on it, started advertising for therapy clients. It took a little while to get things off the ground, but after a few months, I got a few folks to work with at night. I swear though, these after-hours clients put me through so much hell, you better believe I got some stories to tell from it. Let's start with Rachel. Pseudonym, of course, because, I'm not going to break confidentiality. She's my very first client at my new little private practice. We exchanged a few short emails where she had told me she was dealing with depression and grief over a recent breakup and needed support. Didn't have health insurance, but could pay my cash rate. Seemed relatively par for the course for the type of work that I generally do, so I sent her an initial paperwork packet to complete, and we scheduled our first session. Before the first session, I was feeling a bit nervous. She's my first private practice client, and I really wanted to make this work. Been sitting in the office. The only one there is all the doctor's employees along with her had cleared out hours ago. I had a key to get in, leave the front door open, and then had a key card to open the door from the front lobby to get into my office. I always liked that little bit of extra security. I'd gotten there a little over an hour before the scheduled appointment as, I wanted to hype myself up a bit and deal with some nerves and pre-session jitters. We're scheduled for 8:30. There's a phone in the waiting room where clients could call their doctor, or in this case, therapist, to let them know that they had arrived at times when there wasn't someone at the front desk. When I didn't receive a call at 8:30, I thought, geez, first client ever is a no-call, no-show? Just my luck. Damn it. Knew this won't work out. She was my first and only appointment of the day, so after about 15 minutes past the scheduled time with no call, I started to pack my bags and get ready to head home. Just then, I heard my office phone ring. I answered. Hello, this is Brennan. Hi, it's Rachel. So sorry I'm late. Can we still have the appointment? I opened the door and saw a young woman in her late 20s. She was short, rail thin, pretty. Long black hair and piercing green eyes that were accentuated by dark makeup and her choice of all black clothing. She looked like the type of girl I might have gone for during my high school goth punk years. The first session seemed pretty par for the course. I asked her what she had come in for. She discussed recently having had gone through a bad breakup and not feeling like she could get over it. She's feeling extremely depressed since then, didn't feel like she could move on, and really wanted to work on it. My nerves faded a bit, and I settled into my first session routine as I asked her about past therapy. She said she had struggled with depression all of her life and had been in therapy more times than she could count. She didn't really want to go into too many of the details about it, but it is what it is. As I always do, I assessed for safety. She said that she had been suicidal a lot in the past, but not all currently, as quote-unquote, "There's no point in thinking about that now, it's not an issue anymore." She did talk about a lot of self-harm, which was concerning, but as a seasoned therapist, I never look at self-harm in and of itself as an immediate safety risk. All in all, it seemed like a very normal, run-of-the-mill first therapy session compared to what I had been used to. It looked like we were a fairly good fit, as I have a good amount of experience working with folks with similar issues, and she seemed pretty motivated to get into treatment. Sometimes I find it odd that with all the crazy things in this city, the majority of folks' issues are pretty basic. The normal stuff: depression, anxiety, work stress, relationship stress, etc. As we were ending, I told her to hold on a minute, as I ran to the back room to make copies of everything that she had filled out and signed off on. It must have been less than 2 minutes, but when I returned to the office, she was gone. There was a small note left on the couch where she had been sitting that said, "Sorry, had to leave. I'll be back the same day and time next week. Thanks for everything." She's definitely some sort of ninja or something. Now, the office is pretty small, and I didn't hear her leave. It seemed a bit odd, but I was too tired to give it too much thought, given I'd just worked a full day at my agency job, and now I was working pretty late into the night. It's just time to get home, feed the cats, get some much-needed rest. Till the private practice picked up, I was only renting out the office space for 1 day a week to start. I worked the rest of the week, my usual job, and it went pretty well. Doing some good work with a lot of my clients and seeing some real change. It makes me so proud of my folks when I see how hard they're working in session and in between sessions to meet their goals. For all the grumpy vibes I give off in some of my stories, some days I'm so happy to be a therapist, and I just really can't imagine doing anything else. I still hadn't booked any new private practice clients, so Rachel was my only night appointment the following week. I was running a bit late and found her waiting at the door outside of the office when I showed up. My own anxiety was running a bit because I hate being late for anything. Deep breaths. Got this. Now that we were past the first session, which I mostly spend taking a lot of background information and just getting to know the person I'm working with, we were able to get into the actual therapy work. Rachel discussed having had hardcore abandonment issues, as she said, from the time that she was very young. This was both a result and a cause of some pretty rocky relationships. She said she got back into therapy last time to work on her anger issues. She had found out her boyfriend at the time had been cheating on her, which led to her slashing his tires, putting a brick through his window. Some bad stuff. He had broken things off with her as a result and filed a restraining order against her. She said, "I know what I did was wrong, but he made me do it. I still wanted to work things out with him, but he just tried to ghost me. You don't understand how hurtful it can be when someone you're in love with stops responding to your texts, answering your phone calls, won't come to the door. It's just cruel." I'd asked her about work and therapy for this, and she said, "Well, it helped me a whole lot. My therapist was really great and really sweet about the whole thing. Wasn't too long before I didn't feel like I needed to keep showing up at my ex's house, so I didn't have to worry about getting arrested or anything like that." Which I responded, "That's great. It sounds like you worked really hard in therapy and it paid off for you. What kinds of things did you focus on?" "Oh, we did a lot of mindfulness activities and anger management work, but I think it was just helpful to have someone to talk to. I realized I think a lot of the crazy Rachel moments came out more from feeling like I was alone than anything else. When I started working with Craig, I didn't feel that way anymore. She went on to talk about how after her most recent relationship didn't work out and her boyfriend ghosted her, she's been having the same kind of feelings coming back, ripping the stitches out before the wound had healed, so to say. She even found herself standing outside his house a few times and looking in the windows to try to see him. We ended for the week reviewing some clear goals to work on. She left out and I packed up my things. I was beginning to think this might be a bit more challenging than I initially thought. Her behaviors were pretty extreme and the whole stalking thing sort of had me feeling a little uneasy. But she had responded well to therapy before, so things looked pretty promising. Lucky me, things were starting to pick up and I got 2 more clients for my private practice. I had to go in straight from my full-time job as the 2 new folks wanted to get in right after their 9-to-5s. One client was stressed out with their full-time job where she didn't feel appreciated and wasn't really living her dream. The other had social anxiety and needed help boosting his self-esteem so that he could talk to women more easily. Good folks. It seemed like they'd be dedicated to doing the work and not stress me out too much. But then there was Rachel. In her last session, she said she had a relapse. She said she went through the alley next to her most recent ex-boyfriend's house, opened the unlocked window in the back, and broke into his house. Once inside, she told me how she had trashed the place. I sat there calmly as I could as she described the situation. I'd been back there before, so it wasn't like it was hard or anything. I tapped on the windows at first to see if anybody was home. Nobody answered, so either the piece of shit was ignoring me again or nobody was there. Either way, I figured I was good to go inside. I knew he never locked his back windows. Note to self, double check that your windows are always locked. So Rachel, as you're going through this, at any point did you question your decision or, recognize that you're repeating these patterns that... She cut me off hard. You don't understand. I had to do it. He hasn't responded to a single fucking phone call. I've had to have left him like 100 messages by now. What kind of asshole fucks someone, not just fucks someone, but calls them up in the middle of the night over and over, has them come over while their wife's out of town to fuck them, then doesn't even have the common decency to return a phone call? Tell me that, Brennan. I sat there not quite sure what to say or how to respond while she sat there rocking back and forth in her seat and giving me death stares like I was the one who did this to her before she started back in. While I was in there, I was this close to slitting my wrists on their fucking bed. I don't know what I wanted more, him to find me or his wife. Can you imagine him having to explain that? Spent the rest of the session with Rachel trying to de-escalate her, ground her, use some mindfulness techniques. Again, I assessed for safety given the suicidal nature of what she had told me. She assured me that this was just a one-time thing and she had no intention of harming herself or her ex-boyfriend. At least she could promise that she wouldn't act on any of the thoughts until our next session. She didn't show for the next session though. I called her, left a voicemail explaining that I was checking in to see how she was doing and to see if she wanted to schedule another session. I didn't hear her back for a couple of days, so I emailed her expressing my concern given how things were at the last session. Next week came and I hadn't heard from Rachel at all. I saw my 2 earlier clients and right around the time of her appointment, I received an email from her. It read, "Brennan, I'm so sorry I missed our last appointment. I haven't been in contact. I've been feeling really down lately. I don't know what to do anymore. I just can't see things getting any better. I think I just need to do what I need to do to end all of this. I mean, I know it's not right to do something so stupid and impulsive because it's what I want, but it never stopped him." I immediately rifled through my notes, opened up Rachel's chart, found her phone number, and tried to call her. Phone went straight to voicemail. I left a voicemail saying I got her email and I was really worried about her and that I needed her to call me and get back right away. I waited about 10 minutes or so, pacing back and forth in my office before going back to her chart and the initial paperwork. I have everyone sign a consent for me to contact a designated emergency contact for dire situations similar to this one. I found the form she signed with the contact information and was a bit surprised when I saw the name. She had listed what looked like her former therapist, Dr. Craig. Struck me as kind of odd. Most folks list a partner, one of their parents, siblings, a roommate, best friend, whatever. I don't think I've ever seen somebody list a doctor or a therapist. Definitely not a former therapist as an emergency contact. I cursed myself for not having taken a better look at the paperwork at our first appointment and asked about it, but this is all I had right now. I called the number and it went straight to voicemail. It's kind of the typical therapist voicemail, real similar to mine. You've reached the office of and I'm currently unavailable to take your call, but if you leave your name, number, and brief message, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. Take care. I stalled for a second, not exactly sure how to say what I needed to, but I had to get to it. Hi, I'm Brennan. I'm the therapist currently working with Rachel. I'm not sure why, but she had you listed as her emergency contact. Our last session, she was having some increasing suicidal, homicidal thoughts, and while I assessed she was safe, she missed her last session tonight. She sent me an email that has me pretty concerned she might be a danger to herself or others. Please give me a call as soon as you can. I waited another 10 minutes or so, hoping to get a call back from either Rachel or Dr. None of which ever came before I did the last thing in my arsenal. I called the police, told them about the situation, and requested they stop by the house I had on record for Rachel and requested they do a safety check. I really hated doing this because the police in the city don't generally have any decent training around mental health issues, and it's been about 1 time out of 20 I've ever received a call back to let me know whether they actually even did it or not, but hey, gotta do my duty. I sat in my office worrying and stewing on all of this, but there really wasn't much more I could do at this point. I probably waited about an hour before I packed up my things and headed home to pour myself a stiff drink and work on separating work from quote-unquote real life in the way that I always preach to so many others to do. I woke up the next day groggy from poor sleep with the previous night's situation still on my mind, but I had my job to do. Worked through the first half of the day with my clients at my day job. I didn't realize until my lunch break when I went outside for a smoke that I had a voicemail on my private practice number. Clicked the play button and listened in. This is Dr. Craig. I don't know who the hell you are or how you got this number, but if you ever call me again with something like this, I'm gonna press charges. And if you are a therapist, believe you me, I'll be filing a report with the licensing board. You sure are one sick fuck. Call ended. Wow. That's what I thought, muttered out loud. What was that? I never heard anything quite like that. I know this was an emergency call and not a case collaboration call or something like I've done when reconnecting with old therapists, but still, this just seemed a little over the top. This shit was out of line, honestly. I had half a mind to call this piece of shit back and give him business. I would have if I didn't have another appointment in a few minutes and wanted to take some time to center myself so I didn't go in, all that hyped up. I tried calling Rachel a few more times throughout the week. I absolutely didn't try to call Dr. again, though I admit, did an internet search for him, looked up his private practice webpage. Everything looked normal, albeit I'd say he looked a bit smug and full of himself in his pictures. Alright, this is just maybe weird, jealous, insecure part of me coming out because he looks a lot like me. Kind of has short black hair with a lot of grays, short beard, brown eyes like mine. A lot better looking than me, but at least I like to think I don't look like some pretentious asshat in my website photos. Continued on as I normally would, working my job, seeing my folks, and trying to build the private practice on the side. At this point I only had one more person coming in before Rachel's spot. Turned out it was a lot harder to get the private practice gig going than I thought it would. When the other 2 clients decided to stop, that definitely had me down in the dumps. I needed extra money, and the fact I couldn't get my business going the way I thought, really stressing me out. So I sat out on my front step with a cigarette, my cat Finn, glass of Cutty Sark with plenty of ice, and just tried to clear my mind of all the trauma I had John coffee'd from the whole week. And I'm not going to hold you. I had one or two more scotches than I probably should have on a work night. Zoning out a bit, my cigarette was burning down, and had about half an ash tower hanging off of it. Popped up when I heard an enthusiastic, "Hey, you!" I looked up and saw Rachel walking down the street towards me. "I knew we were in the same neighborhood. I didn't think I'd run into you, though." Took me a few minutes to get my bearings about me. I hate running into clients outside of work. You never expect it when you live in a big city with a few million people, but it does happen. I try my best to sit upright, not look like I've been drinking, and be somewhat professional. "Hey there, long time no see. You doing alright? You didn't come to the last appointment, and the one before, you really weren't in a good way." She looked a little embarrassed, blushed a little. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had a few things come up, and I wasn't able to make it. My phone broke, and I was dealing with that, so, you know. Can we have another one?" "An appointment?" "Yeah, you're such a good therapist. I think I really needed a therapist like you." Something about the way she said that just didn't feel right. Sure thing. I still have the same day and time open. Work for you?" "Yeah, totally. You're so sweet, thank you. I can't believe you live right here and I'm just running into you." "Weird, huh?" I said as I flicked the ash from my cigarette. "Not really. At least we're not sleeping together like my last therapist. That'd be real weird," she said with a wink as she started walking away briskly. She waved and said, "See you next week." Wait. The fuck? Did I hear that all right? Almost called out to her, but being a few scotches deep, I wasn't trying to prolong the interaction outside of the office setting. I really hoped that this was some weird dark joke, but that might explain the voicemail I got. I mean, I couldn't think of anything else that would. Skip forward to my appointment with Rachel. It wasn't a joke. Rachel told me how after a couple of months of seeing her last therapist, he invited her out to meet him for drinks one night to continue discussing her goals. And one thing led to another. It took everything I had not to outwardly cringe at hearing all of this. She explained how their relationship went on for a while until he told her he couldn't see her anymore as a therapist or boyfriend. She talked about knowing it was wrong the whole time, but really thought he loved her. This had really caused her to spiral pretty bad. I tried to be as supportive as I could while explaining the importance of boundaries in the therapeutic relationship. All while, of course, letting her know this was not her fault. She's a victim here, taken advantage of by him, this asshole. On top of that, not only was this one of the most unethical things he could have done, but also damn right illegal. I asked if she thought about reporting him at all. She only replied that it was too late for that, and even though I urged her to do so, and if she didn't feel comfortable, asked if she'd give me permission to do it myself. I wouldn't be able to without her permission, given legal and ethical duty to confidentiality. I usually wouldn't be so forward with something like this, but I really felt compelled. There's very little that sends me over the edge more than hearing about fucking bad therapists who do things that are harmful to their clients. And this was probably the worst I've ever heard. She said she'd think about it, but couldn't give me a definitive answer. About 3 weeks passed, and we'd had a few more sessions at that point, mostly focused on going deeper into the trauma of this relationship with Dr. Turned out he was the boyfriend whose house she had broken into and trashed. It also helped answer the question I had thought to myself as to why this person hadn't pressed charges. Made sense. That'd open up a whole can of worms for that scumbag. I felt like we were doing pretty good work around her trauma, getting her to finally accept that this wasn't a normal bad breakup, but a situation where she had been severely taken advantage of, manipulated, gaslighted, all while understanding that she is still responsible for how she acts after the fact. I tried to impart that violence and criminal activity against him would end up causing her more harm than good. All while I really wish this guy would get what was coming to him in some form. She refused again to give me permission to report him the next time I brought it up, so I decided best to leave it alone unless she were to request it. Not gonna lie, this bugged me immensely, but I had to respect her wishes. Things were going pretty smoothly until one day when I got home from work. The stinking fear that had been swimming in the back of my mind came to fruition. It was early evening when I walked through my front door expecting to be greeted by my cats like most days, but I saw them both sitting at the top of the stairs. I called to them, but they just sat there staring at me. Kinda odd. Usually they always come and greet me and then either run to their food dishes or to the back door to be let outside. I walked through the living room and straight to the back to open the back door to see if they'd come running. I opened the door and looked back to the steps, and they weren't budging. When I turned to the open door, I saw Rachel sitting in a chair in my backyard, smoking a cigarette and staring at me. She smiled and waved as all the color drained out of my face. Shocked, I opened the screen door and took a step outside. There's a million things I wanted to say, but in my shock all that came out was, Rachel, what are you doing here? How do you get back here? Don't worry about that. I have my ways, she said with a smirk. You can't be here. You can't be back here. She cut me off. Oh, I know. It's not appropriate, she said mockingly. I just really missed you, and I didn't want to wait until our next session. I figured maybe you wanted to see me too? Oh, god damn it. How am I going to navigate this one? Rachel, you're right in that this is really inappropriate. We can meet at our usual scheduled time in my office. We're going to have to talk about this then, but you have to leave right now. If you come to my house again, I'm not going to be able to continue seeing you. Are you sure you really mean that? You really want me to leave? She said in a way that I couldn't tell if it was more angry or flirty, neither of which were good things in this situation. I took a breath. Yes, Rachel. You need to go now. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. I'll see you in 2 days, and we'll talk about this. I led her through the alley that runs along the side of my house to the front. She didn't speak as we walked out. She looked pretty upset. This must have been how she got in, but it would have required hopping the fence to the alley, then the fence to my backyard. Once we got to the street, she stormed off without saying a word and disappeared around the street corner. I walked back inside, then to my backyard. This time the cats followed me out into the yard. I sat down and buried my face in my hand. Jesus, what am I going to do with this? Given her track record of breaking into her old therapist's house, did I need to be worried about something similar? Hopefully the way I handled this made things pretty clear that I'm her therapist and not nor ever will be her boyfriend. It seemed like that's what she was kind of going for. 2 days came and she no-showed our appointment. I was a little relieved, honestly. But then on the edge the entire walk home, worried she might just be back at my house again. Thankfully not the case. I received an email the next day from her just saying, I'm still mad at you, but I'm doing what I need to do to take care of myself, as you would say. I'll see you next week at our usual time and we can talk. Whew. At least she was alright and won another session, so I knew that we could sort this out. But she didn't show up for that session either. She was the only private practice session I had scheduled, as my only other remaining client had discontinued a few weeks prior. I took the not-so-long walk home. It was a nice night, a bit chilly. I'd smell some smoke in the air, probably folks beginning to break out their fire pits. When I got home, I saw an envelope taped to the front of my door that read, Dr. Brennan. I'm not a doctor, but that's beside the point. It's gotta be from her, I say out loud as I slap my forehead. I pulled it off my door, sat on my front step, and opened it up. The envelope contained 2 objects. There was a handwritten letter and a small newspaper clipping. I took out the letter and read that first. Brennan, I'm writing this letter to apologize for a few things. I'm really sorry for what happened when I came to your house. I thought the only way to get over Craig was to get with another guy. I thought that would help me feel like it wasn't my fault he broke up with me and that I could do better. I thought that's what I needed to move on, and I was wrong. After you kicked me out, I was really angry with you. Part of me wanted to kill you. But I thought about all the work we've been doing and realized that if you acted like Craig did, It only would have hurt me more. Thank you for being a better person than he was. Not that the bar was set too high. I'm also sorry that I didn't tell you the whole truth. Remember the time I told you I should have just slit my wrist on he and his wife's bed? Yeah, I didn't just think about that. I did that. That was about 2 years ago. I haven't been able to move on since, but think I figured out what I needed to do. You can go ahead and report him if you want to. Keep this letter as proof of my permission. Lastly, I'm sorry that I missed our session tonight. I won't be scheduling another. Thank you for all the work you've done with me and for putting up with me. I'll never forget you. Signed, Rachel. I pull out the newspaper clipping and it's an obituary from 2 years ago. Rachel's obituary. Next morning I saw in the news that there was a bad house fire the night before. The only victim, young prominent therapist who had a highly successful private practice in the city and very large social media following. That concludes the first episode, and I hope you enjoyed the stories half as much as I enjoyed making them. I want you all to know how grateful I am for having you join me tonight, especially friends and family listening who are usually not into this sort of thing. I want to dedicate this first episode to my mom and dad, Mary Rose and Bill Jordan, who have given me more love and support throughout my life than any son could hope for. If it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have survived most of the real-life horror stories these fictional ones are based off of. I love you guys so much, and sorry for all the profanity. Raised a good boy, but he curses like a sailor. Lastly, I want to thank all the horror podcasts that inspired me to do this. No Sleep Podcast, which in my opinion is the gold standard. Otis Gyri's Scary Stories Told in the Dark, The Wrong Station, Drew Blood's Dark Tales, Dr. No Sleep, Creepy, a horror podcast, and Scary to Sleep. These are my absolute favorites, and if you like this episode even slightly, I recommend you check them out. From the beginning of the pandemic until now, life's thrown me a bunch of curveballs, and it's been pretty difficult to keep my head up and keep moving forward. Horror podcasts have been one of the best outlets that I've had. I wanted to give it the old DIY try myself and hopefully create something that can do for others what these podcasts have done for me. All this to say, thank you for tuning in. You are loved and appreciated. Have a good night, and I have more stories to share soon, so I hope to see you again. Take care.